Attention! Attention! Fun with History number 21 with Professor Banks. It's a mystery. Fun with History with Professor Banks is on the air. And this week, we are into a special 3-part series. It's a little mini-series. And this week, I've entitled it, It's a Mystery. Stay tuned, we're going to find out more about it right after our music introduction. Welcome to Fun with History with Professor Banks. And today on Fun with History, we are going to be taking a look at a mystery. What is that mystery going to be? I don't know. Stay tuned. But first and foremost, we are officially out of the revolutions now, so the last, 3 weeks we have spent on the revolutions. Last 3 or 4 weeks, I guess, the spiritual revolution that kind of happened, and the American and the French Revolution, and finally the Industrial Revolution. But now we're going to see what happens because of that Industrial Revolution. It does have an impact on today's topic. But first, the joke of the week. And I must apologize, I forgot to do the joke last week, so we must have one this week. So here is the joke of the week, and I hope you do like it. Okay? So here it is. It's about a Mexican bandit. Okay? So I hope you get a laugh out of this one. It's kind of funny, so here we go. A Mexican bandit made a specialty of crossing the Rio Grande from time to time and robbing banks in Texas. Finally, a reward was offered for his capture. An enterprising Texas Ranger decided to track him down. After a lengthy search, he traced the bandit to his favorite cantina, snuck up behind him, put his trusty 6-shooter to the bandit's head, and said, "You're under arrest. Tell me, where you head to loot or I'll blow your brains out." But the bandit didn't speak English and the ranger didn't speak Spanish. So fortunately though, a bilingual lawyer was in the saloon and translated the ranger's message. The terrified bandit blurted out in Spanish that the loot was buried under the oak tree in back of the cantina. So the ranger asked the lawyer who's translating, "What did he say?" asked the ranger. The lawyer answered. He said, "Get lost, you turkey. You wouldn't dare shoot me." I hope you liked that. That's kind of a funny little joke. But I have just a plethora of jokes here, so I like to share them every week in my history lesson. So I hope you liked that. Okay, so today we are going to be looking at this great mystery topic, okay? So, the lesson, as I said, it's called It's a Mystery. So, we are going to be looking at It's a Mystery together. Okay? So, just bear with me for a second here as I bring up my stuff. Okay? Pardon me. Excuse me over here, Professor Banks. Pardon me. This is Jack Bing of the Daily News over here. I am reporting this today. I'd like to know what you're sharing today. What is the topic? Can we get some more details, please, Professor Banks? Why, okay, thank you for the question there, Jack Bing. Thank you for the question that you asked. Okay, so what is it that we're talking about? Let me answer your question, Mr. Bing. What we are talking about today is World War I. Okay, so we had the Industrial Revolution, and it had a great impact on World War I because the Industrial Revolution was making everything being produced, causing a lot of competition, causing a lot of, for the first time ever, competition on goods and products. So World War I, in my definition, Mr. Bing, was basically a big military fight and battle on the ground between many different countries. And it was by far the biggest event to date that impacted most of the world in some form. You see, Mr. Bing, it was called World War I because a lot of countries were either fighting in this war or they were directly impacted by it in some form. Either they were fighting or they were possibly being invaded by enemies. So this was World War I, okay? That is the topic of today's lesson, World War I. And it's such a big topic, I'm going to spend 3 weeks on it just to be able to cover it. So, World War I. Okay, I see, Professor Banks, I see. Okay, okay, got it. Professor Banks, I have another question for you. Again, Jack Bing here of the Daily News, okay? Professor Banks, when did this war happen? Well, again, thank you for your question, Mr. Bing. And I'm very honored to answer questions from you reporters, okay? So, let me share with you the when part of it, okay? So, we're talking about World War I, okay? So, World War I, and what the dates that we had for World War I, it started on August 4th, 1914, and it went to November 11th, 1918. Okay, so those are the dates for World War I. Okay, so started August 4th, 1914, went to November 11th, 1918. Okay? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Banks. Again, Jack Bing over here at the Daily News. Professor Banks, I would like to know, Professor Banks, who was involved in this war? Could you tell me the details about the who in this war, please? Okay, well, thank you very much again for your great question, Mr. Bing. Let me get into that for you, okay? The who, okay? So what we had basically in this war was the Allies. The Allies were the good guys, okay? So when you think of Allies, just think of good guys. And the people that were the Allies was the United Kingdom, France, and the Russian Empire, okay? That was to start. Now, what happened with the Allies was they later were joined by other countries. Very early on in the war, Canada Yay, Canada. Canada joined the Allies. And later on, the Allies were joined by Australia, India, South Africa, New Zealand, Italy in 1915, and finally 1917, near the later part of the war, the USA entered the war as well on the side of the Allies. Okay? Now, the other side of the war, the other side that these allies were fighting were called the Central Powers. Okay? The Central Powers. And the Central Powers, to start off World War I, was essentially two countries, Germany and Austria-Hungary. Okay, so those were the two people on the Central Powers, Germany and Austria-Hungary. Okay, so that was the Central Powers. Now, of course, just like the Allies, the Central Powers were joined later by other countries, but not quite as many because people liked the Ally side. So they were later joined by the Ottoman Empire, which was essentially Turkey. That was late 1914, and Bulgaria in 1915 joined the Central Powers. And also, I forgot to mention with the Allies, and you would have got me on this for sure, Mr. Bing. In April 1916, Romania joined the war on the side of the Allies, but however, Romania really didn't last long on the Allies because within a few months it was occupied by Germans and Austrians. So that was Romania trying to get into the war, and then they were later occupied. Okay, so that is essentially, in a nutshell, the who of World War I. Okay, so Allies, Central Powers. Allies had quite a few nations. Central Powers, not quite as many. Okay, so that is the who. Okay. Thank you, Professor Banks. Again, Jack Bing over here at the Daily News, Professor Banks. Could you please tell me, Professor Banks, what were the main causes of the war? Okay, well, good question, Mr. Bing. The main causes of the war were the main causes. That's actually what was the main causes of the war. It was the main causes. Professor Banks, that doesn't make any sense. What do you mean? I asked you what the main causes of the war were. What were the main causes? You told me the main causes. Yes, that's right, Mr. Bing. The main causes were the main causes. Let me further explain this to you, okay? Let me further explain this to you by this. Okay, so the main causes of World War I were an acronym. This is an acronym. Really easy to remember because all you have to remember is main, and these were the main reasons why World War I started, okay? So, let me bring you up some more information for you. Just give me a second. So, let me give you a bit of a background here, okay? Background is extremely important in understanding this. 1908 to 1913, the military spending of the European powers increased by 50%. Okay, so that leads us to M. M stands for militarism. Okay, that stands for the first reason of the war, militarism. So essentially, military. Okay, so they're right here. Militarism. Britain and Germany were especially in an intense naval arms race with each other. So you had those two that were kind of already starting to be enemies with each other, and Britain and Germany were in this intense arms race to get their hands on more military possessions, especially boats, especially that kind of a thing. And the Industrial Revolution had a great impact on this because of the Industrial Revolution, there was lots of new weapons now that have been created, especially machine guns, rifles, and stronger boats and weapons on boats, a lot of things like that because of the Industrial Revolution. So Britain and Germany were in an intense naval arms race with each other, okay? So that was the first reason for World War I. So that was number one. Number two, just think of the game show Survivor, alliances. So alliances was the second reason. Alliances, nations were constantly jockeying for power. So because they kept jockeying for power, they were making alliances to protect each other. Okay, so we're going to look, I'm going to share with you on that in a few more minutes more about that. But, you know, this nation would say, I got your back, I got your back. You know, if somebody attacked you, we have your back. That is kind of the thing that would be happening, alliances, okay? Imperialism was another one. And again, this is a result of the Industrial Revolution, imperialism, because there is a lot more competition now between countries, and because of all the resources that countries had at their hands now, nations were desiring to grow and expand, especially into Asia and Africa, and Germany was right at that top of that list with the desire to grow and expand, okay? So that is your I in Maine. And then finally, nationalism. So what this means for the N, nationalism, is a desire of nations to maintain their sovereignty. Okay, so they wanted to maintain their sovereignty at whatever cost, and that cost could be as great as a war. So that was nationalism. So those were the four main reasons why World War I broke out, because of these things happening. And obviously, the Industrial Revolution had an impact on that, just like other things in previous history had an impact on the next history. It's how history works, folks. So, those were the four main reasons, and I hope that you get that now, Jack Bing. The four main reasons why the war broke out, okay? Okay, thank you, Mr. Banks. But Jack Bing over here again, Mr. Banks. Jack Bing over here again. I got all the questions today, Mr. Banks. Professor Banks, I got all the questions. Could you tell me, Professor Banks, where this war happened? I would like to know. It's very important for my story. Absolutely there, Jack Bing. I can certainly tell you with the help of a globe, okay? So, I'm going to show you basically where essentially this war was happening, okay? So, again, bear with me for a second. Okay, so you had basically three fronts that the war was happening on, okay? You had a Western front, you had a Eastern front, and you had later on, when Italy entered the war, you had an Italian front, okay? So, let me show you the Western front. The Western front basically ran from the coast of Belgium to Switzerland and with France and Belgium right in the middle of that. So, just let me, I'm going to try to show you here on the globe, okay? If I can. Maybe I can't. Basically, so, but Belgium is right up near France, and Switzerland is right beside France on the other side. So it kind of ran from a corner on the top of France, right through France, down to Switzerland on the western front, okay? And now the eastern front ran from Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Bulgaria on one side to Russia and Romania on the other side, okay? So they call it an Eastern Front because it was a bit more east. So let me try to show you quickly here on this globe. But over here, you see this? This is all Russia over here. Anyway, it's hard to show it, but that was the Eastern Front. So basically, those were the two major fronts, Western and Eastern. That's what you have to be aware of. The Western Front was the most prominent front, and then Eastern Front was getting closer to Russia. And, of course, Germany was a part of that Eastern Front as well. Okay, so, in Austria-Hungary. And then later on, there was an Italian Front, and the Italian Front basically went between Italy and Austria. Okay, so, and again, I showed you where Italy was one time, but I'll try to show it here again. You can't read the map, but there is Italy right there. You can see kind of Turkey over there a bit, but there is Italy, the little boot-shaped peninsula. So that was the Italian Front. The Italian Front, okay? So those were your three major fronts that the war happened on, okay? So, yeah. So that was where it kind of went down, and that's where the fighting happened. That's where all the fighting took place for 4 years, basically. So, okay. Excuse me, Professor Banks. Jack Bing of the Daily News over here once again. Okay? You've done a great job, Professor Banks, of answering my questions, of making me understand this well. But I have one last question. You went over the why, you went over the what, you went over who was involved. But Professor Banks, could you tell me how it really happened? Okay? Maybe a little bit more further on the why, but I would like to know the specifics of the how. Could you do that for me, please, Professor Banks? Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for that question there, Jack Bing. And obviously, I would love to give you a bit more details, okay? So I'm going to do that, okay? So let me explain this to you briefly by explaining a man. Okay, so we saw, basically leading up to the war, we saw a lot of stuff happening, as I said earlier. We saw military spending of countries going up, countries jockeying for position, countries starting to protect each other in case any country got attacked, and their strong desire to keep their own sovereignty. So all these factors were in play. And, you know, with all those factors in play, it really wouldn't take much for something to spark this off. And that is exactly what happened. They got the spark plug or the igniter that they needed, okay? So what that spark plug was an assassination. Okay, so what happened was this man named Franz Ferdinand, an archduke, was assassinated. Okay, so, and that assassination essentially triggered off this whole war. And it wasn't the reason why the war started, but it was the spark plug that got the war going because of the other things that were already in play. Okay, so I'm going to give this, Mr. Bing, you're going to love this answer, okay, because it's going to be a very complete answer. So, basically what happened was Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated in Sarajevo. And his death is the event that sparks World War I. Basically what was happening, why he was so important, he was the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary. So when he was assassinated, Austria-Hungary did not like that. The Yugoslav nationalist Gavrilo Princip in Sarajevo was the man who killed Franz Ferdinand. People in Austria's reaction was mild, almost indifferent, but Austrian authorities encouraged violence against the Serb residents. Okay? So that's interesting to note that the people of Austria weren't really that upset about it, but it was the authorities that were upset and said, you know what? Okay, this is it. Like, you have assassinated our up-and-coming heir to the throne, so that's not good. And let's get even. Let's get some violence going against the Serb people because they were responsible. So, there was anti-Serb riots as well in Sarajevo. Austria believed that Serb officials were in on the plot to murder him, and Austria-Hungary delivered an ultimatum to the Kingdom of Serbia. Okay? So, a big chess match going on sort of between the Austrian officials and the Serb officials after this assassination. July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia and then invaded Serbia. Okay? So, we got an invasion going on here in July, and that set off something else happening, because July 30th, just 2 days later, Russia mobilized their vast army to intervene against Austria-Hungary in favor of its ally, Serbia. This is where the alliances are starting to come into play, folks, okay? This is what is happening. So, Serbia was an alliance of Russia. Austria-Hungary went in and invaded Serbia, and Russia was just like, hey, we have alliances going on here. We are protecting these people. We have a pact with them. You've invaded them, so we are going to mobilize our army. And so when Russia started to mobilize their army, it started a chain reaction that led to the mobilization of the rest of the European great powers and inevitably to the outbreak of hostilities. So let me give you a breakdown of what happened after Russia. So, Russia got mobilized, and because of this, August 1st, Germany declared war on Russia. Germany was protecting its alliance with Austria. So, alliance is totally in play here, and this is why countries are protecting their alliances, and we got big stuff going on. August 3rd, France declared war on Germany, protecting its alliance with Russia. Then, Germany declared war on France and Britain. They were doing that, and then they both declared war on Germany because Britain was protecting France. Okay, so there's a lot of alliances going on here, a lot of protections, and a lot of declarations of war on countries. And then August 4th, 1914, World War I begins. Germany invaded Belgium, beginning World War I. Germany also invaded Luxembourg before moving towards France. And now, September 4th to the September 10th, 1914 was a battle called the Battle of Marne. And this was a good, and the Allies really were strong in this battle. And essentially, this battle prevented the Germans from moving totally into Paris. So, that's what that battle accomplished. And then, I'm just going to tell you one more thing. August 17th, 1914, Russia invaded East Prussia, and Germany and Russia keep pushing each other back on this front, and this is the Eastern Front. They kept pushing each other back on this front for 2 years. Okay, for 2 years. So that is World War I for you. That is basically how it started. We see an impact of the Industrial Revolution on why it started. And really it was a chain set of events, okay? You had these main causes that were a part of what was going on in that time of era over in Europe. And it was starting to get, a lot of things were in place. There were ships in place, weapons in place, alliances in place. And then it only took, the spark plug was only the only thing it really needed to get going. That assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which, you see the invasion of Serbia, and then you start seeing alliances totally come into play, countries protecting each other's alliances, and then full-blown war breaking out in Europe. And of course, an impact. It was called World War I. It wasn't called World War I because it was all over the world. Obviously, it wasn't in North America. It wasn't in Australia. It was mostly in Europe. But it affected most of the countries of the world. So that is how World War I started. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. Now, next week, what I'm going to do is I'm spending 3 parts on this war. So next week, we're going to take a look at kind of how the war progresses and how it actually ends. And then in week 3, what I want to do is take a look at the aftermath of World War I. And because it left a great, huge aftermath, obviously. So I want to take a look at that as well. So, World War I. That's World War I in a nutshell. Thank you. Thank you for your time. And thank you to reporter Jack Bing, especially of the Daily News, to ask all the right questions, because questions are important. And we were trying to figure out this mystery together. It's a mystery, right? So that's why we had an investigative reporter on today to get to the bottom of the mystery too. So anyway, that's what I wanted to leave you with today. So that was World War I, the beginning of it. Next week, we're going to take a look at the progress of it. And I'm actually going to have a special video for you as part of it as well. And this video is going to work. But it's going to show kind of the grim reality of what was happening in this war. Because it was a devastating war. It was a very serious war. And it was a bad thing that was happening, essentially. So next week, the video is going to show you kind of the harsh realities of that. And something called trenches. Okay, trenches was a big part of World War I, and we're going to see that next week. But that is our lesson for this week. So next week, we're going to take a look at the second part of it. And I hope you enjoyed this first part. It's a topic that really is near and dear to me. And World War II actually will be even more of a topic near and dear to me. But I hope you enjoyed this. This has been your professor with the help of an investigative reporter sharing this history lesson. So until next week, take care. This is Professor Banks signing off.